I know it's strange to be talking about Christmas in September, and yet when Pastor Alex came and talked to me about the possibility of doing this series around the idea of the Advent conspiracy and taking back Christmas, and we talked about it, if we waited until Advent to talk about how we were spending our December, we're afraid that all that would do would be heap on guilt and more stress and really not bring about any sort of a change. And so we thought if we talked about how we prepare ourselves to prepare for Christmas in September, maybe it could have some difference of how we live during the holidays. Not just living under obligation and trying to live up to other people's expectations, but trying to be intentional about how we live out our lives during the Advent season. This morning I want us to consider how it is that this Christmas we might spend less but give more. Now that may seem like a contradiction. How can we possibly spend less and yet give more? I believe that is different for each of us, how that may come about, and what I'm hoping is that through the course of the morning and maybe even the days to come, that God might challenge you of what that means for you to spend less and yet to give more this Christmas. This morning's scripture reading is found in Luke chapter 14. And Jesus is talking about the cost of being a disciple, the cost of following Him. And being a follower of Christ, being a disciple, is not just business as usual. It's not doing things the way other people do them. It's living as a disciple means being set apart. It means living as an ambassador, living as Christ's representatives in the world. It means that we are aliens in this world, as Paul would say, and we're called to live differently from everyone else. Listen to Jesus' words about the cost of being a disciple in Luke chapter 14, beginning with verse 28. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he says if he lays the foundation and it is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, "This fellow began to build and was not able to finish." Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Will he not first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask him for terms of peace. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. I believe this passage is a passage that talks about how it is that we approach being a disciple with our eyes wide open. It's talking about living a life with intentionality. And Jesus said that as we live a life of intentionality, we first must make a decision. Make a decision about what it is that we're going to do. He gives an example in this passage about someone who has decided that he's going to build a building. He's going to build a tower. And if you're going to build a tower, then you need to have a plan. You need to have architectural drawings. You need to know what the building is going to look like. But also in having a plan, you need to know how much it's going to cost. Do you have enough money to finish the building? You need to consider the consequences. Because if you're not able to build the building, if you're not able to finish the building, then you will be putting yourself up for ridicule. There will be heartache. There will be disappointment. In order to be successful, you need to have a plan, and you need to be intentional about it. Jesus gave another example as well. He talked about a king going to war. Now, this could be a king making a decision that he's going to attack another country. Or this parable seems to indicate the story seems to indicate that someone is coming to attack the king and his kingdom. And so the king needs to make a decision. He needs to have a plan of how are they going to fight this oncoming army, and they need to consider the consequences. In the story, Jesus said that if you've got an army coming at you with 20,000 soldiers, and you've only got 10,000 soldiers, then you better be thinking about the consequences, because it's probably not going to be good. And so he said you need to be intentional. You need to send a delegation out to meet them while they're still far away and see what their terms of peace are. Jesus says you need to have a plan. You need to count the cost. You need to consider the consequences. When Jesus encourages us to count the cost of being a disciple, it means that we're being called to live differently from the status quo of the world in which we live. We're to consider doing things God's way. Now, when it comes to doing things differently from the ways of the world at Christmas, that may mean something different for each one of us. But I want to challenge you to consider, what does it mean in your life to take back Christmas? What does it mean in your life to be intentional about this coming Advent season? Last week, Pastor Alex talked to us about worshiping the Christ child at Christmas. He talked about worship being more than just coming into the sanctuary on Sunday mornings during Advent or coming into the sanctuary on Christmas Eve. But he talked about taking our worship out beyond the walls of the sanctuary. And what does that mean, to take our worship beyond the walls of the sanctuary? It means being the hands and feet of Christ. It means being His ambassadors in the world in which we live. When I say that we should spend less and give more this Christmas, one application might be that we spend less on things and more on needs. Being intentional about investing in the life of another person. Not just going to the mall and seeing what bargain we can find in order to check someone off of our list, but rather figuring out how it is that we might be able to invest in someone's life that is really responding to some sort of a need. Maybe it's not buying anything at all. Maybe it's giving ourselves to someone. Maybe it's going and visiting that person that you've had intentions of visiting for many months, maybe even a whole year. But taking in time during Advent to go and visit them, a shut-in, someone that's been ill, someone who's in a nursing home. Maybe it's an issue of making a phone call, trying to reconnect with someone that you've not seen for a long time. Maybe it's baking bread or cookies and taking it to someone and letting them know that you're thinking about them and remembering them. Maybe it's an issue of intentionally making a contact with someone from whom you have been estranged for several months or even years. How can you spend less on things, but yet give more of yourself during this Advent season that's coming up in a couple months? This means that you may be focusing less on purchases that you check off a list, and you do more to give of yourself to others. It's been said that Christmas in America is more about getting what we want than giving people what they need. Christmas in America is more about getting what we want than giving people what they need. Is this the tradition that we want to pass on to generations that follow? As we think about Christmas, it began with God giving His Son. God didn't send His Son into the world because of what He needed, but God sent His Son into the world because it was what we needed. That gift of God's Son came to us because God was responding to the need that we had in our life. So as we follow that example, we need to look at how can we give, how can we invest in someone else's life that is responding to the need that they have.